Hey guys, so I got a 2008 F350 today that I'm working on, and it was actually towed in for a no crank situation. He remote started it actually, and it remote started just fine, and then it just quit on him. Went outside, said what's going on, and he went to go crank it and try to start up the truck again to leave, and he get this. Put the key in, turned it on, everything proves out just fine, normal, right? I'm going to go crank it. Odometer goes out like normal because you're put in the crank position. No errors at all. Now what he thought it was is that it had something to do with the remote start system, and once that timed out or cut out, because everything is running through it, he figured it was just the remote start system, had it towed in. Now obviously this is not a PATS issue. Turn the key on, PATS proves out just fine. It's a little lock in the bottom left hand corner, and that allows engine starting. Now PATS was an option on the 2008s to 2010s, and so yours may or may not have that, but it's just something to go over in case you do have it, to look at that prove out. Now when the PCM usually finds a problem with the exhaust gas temp sensors, any one of them, it will not let you start the vehicle for a timer of 60 minutes. Now if the fault is continuous, it won't let you start it at all. Now in this case, it's exhaust gas temperature sensor 3. It's an open circuit. It was open internally, and when it's open internally and gets the higher voltage, it actually thinks it's at I believe it's 1300 degrees. It thinks that's that rear sensor's at, so it's gonna shut it down. So we're gonna go into the engine compartment, and I'm gonna go over a few quick things to test, so that you can see if it is a starter issue, ignition starter issue, or it is a sensor that's cutting out the PCM, not letting it. Alright, so over here by the air box on the 6.4 liter, there's a big thick wire here. It's about 10 gauge, I would say, and it's a single wire to connector here. You're going to squeeze this side, and then you'll pull it out like that. And then on this side, what we're going to do is we're going to apply 12 volts to it straight from the battery right here, and we're going to see if it cranks or not. Now if it's a theft issue or a starter issue, we're going to find that out right away because it will not crank. And here we go. So we got it started, and the one thing you'll notice in the cluster is that the check engine light is on. Now us messing with that wire over there for the starter, that's the S terminal wire, for the starter solenoid, that will not cause a check engine light at all. So if you didn't have one on before, this problem happened where you got a no crank, or you had a message in the cluster that said something to the effect of pull over safely now or shut down engine safely now. Once you turn it off, it's gonna set that timer if it was an intermittent issue for 60 minutes. After that, if it's a constant problem like this one was, it will be a no crank until the situation is fixed and it's getting an accurate reading from that EGT sensor. So this one's running just fine. You could literally, get out of Dodge and get down, back home, whatever you got to do, and then go from that point to take care of that sensor. So this is a really, really easy check. If it's cold outside, if it's freaking hot outside, you could do this quick check and get your truck back up and running so you can get it to a garage or get it home to work on it and pull codes. Now in order to identify which sensor is which, because there is 3 exhaust gas temp sensors on the vehicle, and it goes from the front to the rear, 1, 2, and 3. It'll be identified as 11, 12, and 13 because the first number is which bank it is. Obviously it's bank 1, they call it. I don't know why I call it that. And then 1, 2, 3 from front to back. So number 11 is this one right here. It's before the cat, and it's at an angle. It goes to the frame. And this one is 12. It's before the DPF, big old DPF, and that one goes straight up, and of course connects in the frame also. And then 13 is behind the DPF to check its efficiency based on temperature. And it's right here. And I already took it out. And then it connects up on the frame there. So they all connect on the frame, and the most common one, I believe, is this one's pretty common, number 12, because of the heat right here. But the hottest one should be the last one. As it goes through all the processes and it gets hotter and hotter, the last one, the final output of all these converters basically and filters, will be the hottest one back here. And that's what it's looking at during regeneration. So this one right here fails more often than most because of the heat extremes it's put through. And the problem with these is that they don't cost too much, but they get stuck in the parts. Whether it be the cat or the DPF, they get stuck in them, and you got to take them out a certain way so that you can just take the sensor out and replace the $70 sensor and not pull the whole DPF down to try to extract it or replace the DPF. So what I've been using over the years to get these out without going after a oxyacetylene torch and getting crazy underneath here is what I do is I unplug this sensor from the main harness, and then I cut the actual metal tip that sticks out of it, so they end up with something like this when you're done. So what you can do now is put a socket on here, 6-point socket, instead of an open-end wrench, so you don't round this off. And you can even put a shallow 6-point on here, and you can really get in here with a little breaker bar and pop that without rounding off the head. That's the most common issue on here, is that it does not budge in here, but it'll round on here. Now what I've also found is that a 1/2 inch standard size will fit on here really snug. If you're ever having any soft rounding issues, before I get to that point, you put a 1/2 inch on here instead of a 13, and it'll fit nice and snug on there, and get it off that way too. So most people don't have an oxyacetylene torch laying around their house, and I personally don't like using them, except when I have to. And so what I use for something this close proximity and all that, I use a propane torch. Now if you have a MAP gas torch, that's even better. It's a little hotter and it won't ruin anything, because obviously it's cooler than oxyacetylene. And all you gotta do is torch it for a while on there. I'd say maybe 2-3 minutes of a propane torch, and then you can start trying it. Now beforehand, before you do all that, I recommend spraying it with rust penetrant, obviously, and let it soak for 10-15 minutes, and then we can start torching it for about 2 to 3 minutes, and then we can start trying to loosen it. This has worked for me over and over again on these sensors. I replaced a couple of them over the years, and it happens to come out every time, no problems. And that's the actual sensor tip coming out, and you can see it has the piece on here so it cannot fall in there. Now when I go to install the new sensor, I put a little bit of dielectric grease on the 2 pins in here, and then I plug it in until it clicks. And then when I go to install the new sensor, I put a little bit of anti-seize in the threads, and then start threading it in by hand in case we ever got to take it out in the future. High temperature nickel anti-seize I put on there just in case, and that should be able to handle the heat also. Get it all in by hand, and then you could use a 13 mil open end on here and just snug it down. You don't need to get nuts on here. Just like that. Now you may get back in the truck and you go to crank it and it still ain't cranking, You're like, man, that guy Ford tried to make you look like a real moron. This thing still ain't working. Well, what you need to do, because the system still has a timer going, until it sees a no-fault situation, the timer doesn't stop. Okay, so whether you clear the codes with the scan tool or by disconnecting the battery, once they're cleared, and then you turn the key back on, doesn't matter if it sees a perfect signal or not, that 60-minute timer is still in effect. Even with us at the dealership and our fancy scan tool that can get in all these security areas of the PCM and everything, we still cannot bypass that. I have not tried disconnecting the battery for 20 minutes or whatever, but even me at the dealership, I had to clear the codes, reset the memory in the PCM, and then I waited and I watched the timer, and I walked over and I tried it a couple times, and then right at that 60-minute mark, 1 hour mark, I went over and no problems, no errors, perfect. So keep all that in mind when you're completing the repair, so that we do it properly. We clear the codes and we let it wait that 60 minutes. After that, we can test it over and over again. I've never seen any harness issues on these. Not to say it cannot happen, but I've never seen any harness issues on these either. The 6.7s had the new ones. Imagine that. On 2011s, they had problems with the body. When they lowered the body, I think it was the bed or the cab, they were pinching the harness on the frame. But yeah, on the 6.4s, I've never seen any corrosion, chafes, nothing like that, and the harness going all the way back up to the PCM. So that's something to keep in mind. So I hope your EGT came out as mine has. And remember, don't start yanking on that EGT and trying to get it out, getting frustrated. Just give it time, give it soak time, give it heat, let it expand and contract and break that rust bond. And it's better to do that for a while than pull that component down, whether it be the CAT or the DPF. It's a major headache after that if you start rounding off that old EGT when you're trying to pull it out. So hopefully this video is informative as far as how the system locks itself out. I think it's a safety issue. I don't want to protect the DPF, or it's a federal thing, or it thinks it's shorting out and it's going to backfeed to the PCM. I think it's more of a save the DPF issue. What is going on? I cannot get these readings correct. They're not jiving. I'm just going to shut the system down, because when the engine runs, if it really was that high back there, the 1,000 degrees or whatever, and the rest of them are showing, let's say, 80 degrees outside, ambient temperature, running the engine is only going to make it worse. So that's why they're locking you out.